Hello everyone, this is update for August 24, 2024, day 913 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for August 23, 22. So I'm gonna start with general strategic update, and I'm gonna switch to the situation on the battlefield. I'm gonna start, as you can see, with macroeconomic update. There was a little bit of information that came from Europe. Specifically, I just want to highlight two data points. One from France manufacturing PMI, and then German manufacturing PMI. It's basically a very good proxy for the situation in the manufacturing sector of both countries. As you can see, things are getting from bad to worse, and actually at this point France, that was doing a little bit better manufacturing wise, actually caught up to Germany and doing equally terribly. So as you can see, 42.1, and they both have actually surprisingly the same sort of number, the same level, and for those who are not familiar with this metric is basically showing if something is contracting or expanding. So anything that's above 50, it means expansion. Anything below 50 means contraction. So, and the lower the number, the worse the contraction is. Sorry for misusing the words. So as you can see, it's 42. It's pretty ugly in both countries. So that really corroborated by other numbers that I showed you before, with all of the exports and industrial production and so on. So basically Europe is firmly on the path of destructing its own manufacturing base and its own well-being and wealth generating assets, essentially. So I just want to sort of chronicle that. There's no surprises here, I guess, for those who are regular viewers, but just want to mention that. Then I just want to provide a little bit of data about the US. And similar PMI numbers came out for their preliminary numbers, so they sort of they will be revised because it's sort of early numbers and not perfect, and it's for August. So also showing contraction in US manufacturing, similar situation to France, basically to Europe. It's just not as bad as it is in Europe. The sort of strength of the US economy is service PMI, or services sector, which is largest part of the economy. And similar actually situation with Germany and France, where service sector is in expansion territory. Similar situation in the US. But again, the fact that the expansion is in service is typically is not a good sign, generally speaking. Because specifically in the US, significant portion of the service means healthcare, which is from a perspective of if you look at this in terms of how it's helpful for the society, it's not something that you sort of welcome. When you're spending more and more on healthcare, really means that something is not right, sort of society-wise, in terms of societal health, right? So you ideally, if you're healthy, you don't spend much on health, and that's great. I think everyone is striving to be healthy and not to spend money, because effectively it's a waste, it's expense, because you'd rather do something else. I don't know, whatever it is for everyone, travel, I don't know, buy a house, do something else. You rather spend that money on something that actually you enjoy. So as I said, in the case of US, there is a significant portion of those medical expenses. Europe is not as tilted in that way, but anyways, service is not something you can eat, or it's not tangible. So it's not it's not generally a great sign, basically. The job market actually in the US remains more or less stable, actually returned a little bit back to the prior numbers, which are sort of more favorable. At the same time, head of US Central Bank, Jerome Powell, clearly indicated that US is going to be cutting interest rates. Currently, they are saying 4.25 to 4.5. Sorry, 5.25 to 5.5. So in that range. So sometime in September, the U.S. Central Bank will start cutting rates. It does seem that this is really driven by the pressure, political pressure, and pressure of the business in the U.S. to reduce interest rates, because I would say they are normal, really, interest rates. They create tremendous pressure on over-leveraged businesses in the U.S., and there could be cascading effect of defaults, and then obviously the bankruptcies in terms of businesses, and then that will lead to eventually layoffs. So he's apparently preemptively sensing that this is where the situation is going. He is trying to prevent that from happening. There's also strong political pressure in terms of some false belief among politicians. Obviously, maybe that's not false belief, because what they believe is actually, it's totally another question. But the message is, okay, if we reduce interest rates, then people can afford to buy houses, which is completely misguided and wrong, because the price of the house is really purely mathematical function of actually interest rates, and so the lower the interest rate, the higher the price of the house is going to be. So that really means that reducing interest rates will increase house prices even higher, and I believe they essentially everywhere in the West, they are close to be unaffordable to majority of say middle class, and so this is only gonna make things worse. This is not gonna create some sort of solution or relief for anyone, because the problem is outside of the world of finance, and it's really in terms of regulations and incentives and general competitiveness in the economy. It really means that there is lack of competition due to overregulation, and that's really the root cause of the problem. And obviously, U.S. central bank, as any other central bank, cannot resolve that problem. That's really the problem is on politicians' side. And so in some ways, U.S. central bank is doing sort of political game where they push the problem back to where it sort of belongs, to the political class, and let them sort of deal with it. But the likely outcome of this reduction of interest rates in the U.S. is that inflation that was sort of kind of contained, and I would say it was not completely under control, but at least it was not completely out of control, let's put it this way. So it's probably going to go back up to quite like 4 or 5%, probably in 6 months or more. I don't know how the transmission mechanisms we'll find out as things will develop. But what's being done is that essentially under pressure, U.S. central bank is reigniting inflation, which will lead the way it may play out, and this will lead to some social unrest, and that will lead to political change, and so which that might be actually the right sort of solution to all of this, because the root cause is obviously coming from the political class and from society as a whole, that doesn't realize that you cannot use sort of finance and leverage to create wealth. It needs to be really created in tangible physical ways. Now let's move to the next place, is actually Japan. And here there is a number for CPI came there, which is 2.8%. So as you can see, the inflation is quite stubborn in Japan. This also means that Japanese central bank is unlikely to reduce interest rates. They're already low, and the fact that U.S. central bank is reducing interest rates and Japanese central bank is keeping them the same, that really reduces differential between the two. What this really means is that really will even push further repatriation of Japanese capital from the U.S. So in turn, it will be harder for the U.S. to finance its governmental debt. That's as and may sort of flow, create a blowback in terms of equity and generally fixed income markets. Then there's another news that I want to mention because it's actually very relevant to the war in Ukraine and to the conflict. And this is about owner and CEO of messenger called Telegram. His name is Pavel Durov. He lives in United Arab Emirates, and he flew to Paris, not sure why, where he was immediately arrested upon leaving his airplane. And the why it's important is because Telegram is widely used, and I would say Russian army is totally relying as a communication tool, especially on the levels from the battalion and below, or based on the tactical level. It's almost like a lifeblood in terms of communication. Ukrainian army is also heavily relying on Telegram, not to the same extent as Russian army. And what's really happening is that French intelligence service essentially wants to get access to Telegram and being able to have access to all of this wealth of information, let's put it this way. And unfortunately, he become sort of collateral damage in the fight between two competing intelligence services. By that I mean Russian and French. And France has a lot of, I would say, negativity towards Russia, because Russian intelligence created a lot of problems for France, especially in Africa, and I would say quite a bit of pain. So this is sort of kind of retaliation for that, and unfortunately this person looks like become sort of collateral damage in a fight of two titans. So we'll see if that would be very interesting, because it can really create huge blow for Russian military if the French intelligence gets access to Telegram and will be able to monitor communication by the Russian troops, because there is really no other alternative for Russian troops. And so that's really creating desperate situation. Ukraine, it doesn't matter so much, because Ukraine is together with obviously France, Germany, and US, and so on. So there's nothing there's no essentially real meaningful secrets there. But for Russian military, this is a pretty huge blow. Now I want to mention. Not forgot, but actually there was actually explanation for this visit by Li Chang, who is premier of Chinese State Council. He came 3 or 4 days ago to Russia. Actually, the reason for that visit was to arrange, to figure out how to do payments between the two countries. I mentioned before that Chinese banks don't really want to be conduits in financial transactions between Chinese exporters and Russian importers because of the sanctions from the West. So they're trying to figure out probably some kind of governmental solution, and maybe some kind of governmental bank that will essentially will process all of the payments between the two countries. So remains to be seen what the solution is. But the reason for this trip was exactly to develop that solution, how to conduct payments between the two countries. Now I'm gonna do a walk through the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. So I'm gonna start first with the Kursk region, and there is essentially no special news here. Ukrainian forces, I wouldn't say stuck, but the advance stalled, and Ukraine president effectively admitted there is no strategic thinking behind this move. This is just move to, we did it because we could, and going back to what I said, that in the long run this probably will create more problems than solutions. But for now, it was a very huge political blow for Russian president, obviously. Wasn't that huge military blow for Russia, or territorially, these territories are largely irrelevant. Actually, I want to mention there was one viewer who wrote about this with a question about measuring station that's basically measuring natural gas that's going through the pipeline that's going in Sudzha from Russia to Ukraine and then to Europe, and significance of that. And I would say that's completely irrelevant. It's really, this war is not about natural gas or crude oil. It's not. It's in some way it's more like civilizational confrontation. And thinking about this in terms of purely primitive financial reasons is really not right way to think about it. That it's not gonna help to understand what's really happening there and what drives all of these moves. But going back, as I stated in the previous video, it looks like Ukrainian forces at this point reached the maximum area that they can sort of control, and slowly but surely Russian troops starting to push back on Ukrainian forces. And as I mentioned before, it looks like this is a turning point for Ukrainian forces, where they eventually, slowly but surely, will be losing this captured territories. The only caveat to this is this area south of Seym River that I'm showing here, that it's very likely that Ukrainian forces will be able to actually capture these territories, clear them, and so on, and potentially capture some prisoners of war, because at this point there's no communication, or there's no access from this area to large Russian area. The only escape route is basically swimming across this Seym River. It is not a huge river. It's about like 30 meters wide, maybe 20 in some areas. So it's totally sort of swimmable, and you can cross it, but obviously you have to leave all of the equipment behind and so on. So at this point, Russian troops here trapped. It's unclear the size, probably maybe 1,000, maybe slightly more. Don't know exact numbers, but essentially this is it in terms of this Kursk invasion, and unfortunately it was, I would say, much ado about nothing. Now let's move to the situation northeast of Kharkiv. Things here are completely stalled, stalemate, and no essential moves in this area by both sides. Now let's move to the north Luhansk section of the front line. Things here also more or less the same. Russian pressure without meaningful advances towards Kupiansk. And then in the southern sector as well, Russian pressure also without meaningful advances. There was actually Ukrainian counterattack by the 3rd Brigade. They managed to push Russian troops a little bit, have some basically recaptured lost territories. Essentially, that's just really was essence of this counterattack. So nothing sort of earth-shattering. The same as there is nothing earth-shattering for Russian troops here either. Now let's look at the situation on the north Donbass section of the front line. Things here also remain more or less the same. Russian pressure without much success because the pressure is, I would say, perfunctory. It's not meant to truly make any advances. It's just really to keep Ukrainian units glued here, so Ukrainian command cannot move any reserves from this area. Similar situation is going on in Krasnyy Yar. Russian troops are basically, they advance stalled, at least for now, simply because there is not enough resources to support advance here. There is that Ukrainian invasion in Kursk region kind of sort of created problems with availability of resources, or in other words, there's not enough resources for all of the areas where Russian command is actively attacking. So this area is, call it, on hold temporarily, but I'm sure that as soon as Russian command has enough resources, they will renew attacks here in a strong way. Now let's look at the situation in the central Donbass section of the front line, where things are really becoming unglued, and a really bad situation developing for Ukrainian forces, and where this is priority area for Russian command. This is where all available resources are channeled and pumped, and there is no sort of withdrawal of any resources from here due to the attack in the Kursk region by Ukrainian forces. So let's just look at the more detailed map, because it's a little bit more clear. So I didn't update from the last video, but there are no huge significant updates. The essence is Ukrainian front line is slowly but surely collapsing. Russian troops entered Hrodivka here, so they kind of created the dent here, and basically Hrodivka is in process of being lost by Ukrainian forces. Also, Russian troops captured Krasnyy Yar here as well, so now they're gonna start attacking, preparing for attacks towards Mykolaiivka here. Novohrodivka is also close to be lost, I would put this way. At least it's not going to last that long. And once Novohrodivka is lost, this really sort of opens up floodgate for Russian troops to move basically behind Selidovo from the west and south of Pokrovsk, and this is really straight way to basically anywhere, and as I stated before, to Dnipro river. That's really where the end goal of all of this is. Also, Russian troops are at this point attacking Kalinovo, and they actually captured portion of the village. They also advanced on the flanks of Kalinovo here as well, and there are some advances in Kharkiv. So things get worse. They are not hugely worse, but there is essentially the same sort of direction, the same path that the whole situation is developing, which is it is on the verge of catastrophic for Ukrainian forces. Now let's look at the situation on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here also stable, quiet, for the same reason I mentioned before with other areas, is that this area is essentially a donor of Russian of resources for Russian command in the other areas where the Russian troops are active. Otherwise, it's just probing pressure, nothing really major going on here. Now let's finish with the last section of the front line along Dnipro River. Things here are completely quiet. There is not even anything major going on. So again, obviously for obvious reasons I already explained. I'm sure that some of these units probably also pulled from this area at this point. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.